Hello, listeners, and welcome to the 8th episode of the Adapt podcast, the podcast about how society adapts to the world's growing challenges. My name is Harish Murgeesan, and I'm a rising freshman at The Ohio State University. And today, for our season 1 finale, we are joined by Mr. Timothy J. Eiler. Mr. Eiler is the principal of one of the most high-tech schools in America. The Ehrman Crest Middle and Elementary School is among the highest ranked schools through the many innovations implemented into a basic school design plan. The school is valued at $63 million and was made in collaboration with the Seneca Valley School District and the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. Today, Mr. Eiler is here to talk with me more in depth about this advanced school. So thank you again for joining me today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Now, the first question I really like to ask a lot of my guests on the show before we get into their innovations is kind of what steps did you take to the place you are at today, and kind of what's your personal story and that led to being principal at this school?
Wow. Do you want the whole long winding road?
I mean, any way you want to put it is fine with me.
No, honestly, I never imagined I'd be in public education. I was a farm kid, grew up in a farming family, but my parents very much valued getting an education, especially my dad, who had actually been a high school dropout. So he really valued us getting an education. I found my way through college to become an elementary education, be an elementary teacher, and then from there I just worked my way through various school districts as an elementary teacher, a reading specialist. Eventually, I became a principal at a small rural school district in northwestern Pennsylvania before landing at Seneca Valley as what was then the principal of Evans City Middle School, fifth and sixth grade building in the district. And I actually was on the job for 2 weeks, and when I first found myself in planning meetings for Ehrman Crest.
Sweet. So was your growing up, you said like you lived on a farm, and how was that kind of, was there schools there kind of, would you feel like there was a kind of technological or just like a general innovation separation between kind of like the higher class schools and like kind of the area where you grew up in?
Yeah, it was a very rural farming community, and there was, at the time, the technology gap wasn't maybe what it was today because, growing up in the late '80s and '90s, um, computers weren't what they are now, and so, um, things like the Apple IIe in elementary school was a big deal, and then it became the Tandy computers by the time we were in high school. So it wasn't as widespread as it is now as far as technology. But I also saw the innovation of, from a different lens, of very hands-on learning. We had quite an agricultural program that was all about internship and application of what we were learning. And I feel like that meaningful part of learning really is what I pursue today and really has inspired some of the things that I want to see from our school is really getting kids engaged in what they're doing. And it's what we make, say, and do, not necessarily a test score.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned kind of hands-on learning, but in recent times we've seen a lot of technology, and through the COVID pandemic, learning has kind of shifted towards not an all online type of program, but it's shifting more in that direction. So how does Ehrman Crest really try to balance that hands-on approach while still using like the newer technologies, innovations to keep that connection with the students?
Yeah. So much what we wanted to do was create an environment that has kind of a just-in-time approach, provides for opportunities for collaboration, throughout the building and looks at technology as being something that should be applied and interacted with. So, um, for instance, we have walls that um, have as a technology that are maybe look like normal walls, have maps on it, but the maps are all magnetic, so that kids can interact with the map as they're talking and working with each other. Or we've gone to we have a space we called Circ that's kind of our hybrid of library and STEM, where students are uh, not just using technology um, to show their learning as far as answering questions, but being able to embark in coding and using things that already exist for innovation and planning projects, almost in like a Shark Tank like project.
Okay, so that sounds almost, you mentioned like the Shark Tank like
Yeah.
aspect of that. Could you go a little bit more deeper into that or kind of explain?
Yeah, that was something that started a few years ago, even before we were in our new building. We had a superintendent who pioneered like that whole idea of evolving that program, and they call it Circ Tank. And students each year have to design and present um, something that they came up with, their own innovation, and they get to we bring in stakeholders from outside the district, community members who might run local businesses, and we watch the presentations, give them feedback on it, and if they do well enough, they get to go to we're near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they get to go to almost like a competition that happens there, so that they can present their innovations there. But the idea is to either come up with something new based on a need. I've seen students come up with uh, all kinds of things, from new pet products to new cooking products, to things to keep us warm on a cold winter day if we're stuck outside too long. Students come up with all kinds of projects and things you wouldn't think of. One of the neatest innovations was actually a makeup design that some girls came up with. And knowing nothing about makeup, I gave them feedback like that's incredible. That's something that I could buy as a Valentine's gift, because it was right around Valentine's Day when they were showing us their innovation. So, but the idea is to spark learning and to spark creativity through these projects.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it's a great way to build children's interests and put it into some fields that they've really just been really interested as since they were a kid. And I mean, who knows? I may be interviewing one of your students in the future as
I
it
hope
goes along with the
so.
theme of innovations. So going back to the Ehrman Crest Middle School, what was kind of the idea or beginning kind of inspiration that came to make it the way it is?
Uh, I think one of the coolest parts about the entire project was how many perspectives were involved, how much collaboration took place. We partnered with Canon Design as our architect. We had, you know, we had partnership with the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. A representative from that gave us input and feedback. We had a superintendent and school board who were very much on board with and really came with the idea of, let's not make this look like an institutional school. And really that dialogue about how do we make it look like a place kids want to go and learn, because kids are, I've heard um, a rep from Canon Design and our superintendent talk about, when kids go to the children's museum, they're excited to go there. They're excited to learn. How do we create that environment at the school? And the answer was to go less institutional. And so we had all types of stakeholder groups, like the ones I mentioned, but groups of teachers. We pulled in groups of students to brainstorm and share feedback of what they wanted to see in the learning environment. Um, and we as principals were heavily involved and gave a lot of feedback. So the school itself came from all of those perspectives, and we had we had governing ideas that we wanted to see as part of this. We said we wanted it to be sustainable, safe, dynamic. We wanted to bring nature in from the outside, which is why there's all kinds of natural light in the building. We wanted learning and process to be on display, not just finished product. So all of those perspectives make building the special place it is.
Yeah, so I actually heard you mention kind of you didn't want the children to be very in an institutionalized kind of
Yeah.
place. So was that do you always feel that institutionalized schools with very just strict curriculums and timings lead to less efficient students, or does it decrease kind of the efficiency of the learning process?
I think it almost, in a way, I don't know if it depends how we just define efficiency. I think when we look at efficiency, sometimes it's about checking off the boxes, which is what we wanted to get away from. And sometimes learning is true, deeper learning is less efficient. And sometimes it's about making mistakes and learning from them. So how do we make an environment that fosters curiosity and investigation? And sometimes learning is messy and sometimes it's not clean, but it's interesting. And we might go deeper and learn more in the long run, even though it seems less efficient.
That makes more sense, actually. I'm kind of understanding the idea of kind of, helping kids learn from their mistakes more than just getting the correct answer. So when it comes to the Ehrman Crest Middle School, it must have, I know we haven't talked about all the features yet, but out of the many features, right, being like one of the most high-tech schools in America, what is one feature that you find that most teachers enjoy using the most with the students?
Oh man, which one? Yeah, I think the flexibility of the design in general. We have in between classrooms, we have these spaces we call collaboration space because everything was designed to be a learning space. And the fact that I now see teachers going out and designing projects together, and I'll see two entire classrooms in one of these places with both classroom teachers involved, taking different portions of the lesson, creating small groups and more interaction and collaboration between students. You're seeing uh, through that collaboration, kids be interested because they're working maybe with someone they typically don't work with in their classroom, but teachers are building on each other's strengths and inspiring each other to try new things. So I think that flexibility and giving people the freedom to create is one of the neatest innovations um, that we're seeing being used, and it's really about that whole part of allowing teachers the freedom to try new things and be flexible. And if it goes well, great. If it doesn't go well, what did you learn from it? What can we do different next time?
So that almost kind of goes along, and I can see how that helps lots of teachers as learning plans. Now, what is one feature you find children most enjoy in the school? Or what's the most um, fun feature or the feature that most students enjoy the most?
I think the kids love. There is when you come in the entrance of the school, there is a ramp that is the centerpiece of the community center of the building, that middle section, and that whole part there. Kids love to walk on the ramp. They love to see the view of the building from there and from upstairs. I think it's about a quarter of a mile long when you go all the way around, but it serves more than just um, the aesthetic view of it. It was put their purpose to inspire movement, which the kids love. The railings are all magnetic, so we can display work in progress, so that kids can we put magnets in their art projects and things that are going on up on that ramp. It's also very much for sensory. The fact that you get the gross motor movement and the texture that's on that ramp, it has multiple purposes, but it's also a beautiful fixture in the school.
I understand. So you also mentioned like kind of getting students to get like that physical movement in kind of like their small recess in between their class periods, I'm guessing. So what other features are there in the school that kind of motivate children and students to, be more physically active?
Or physically active. Number one, you can't go anywhere without walking a good deal because the building it's spread out and it was done so to encourage movement on purpose. It's bright and wide open, lots of sunlight and color, just to encourage the not just the nature aspect of it, but kids wanting to be lively and vibrant. But with that said, it is quite a large campus too. We have large playgrounds, large grounds that kids can go out and enjoy nature and things in it. And then there's the ramp built in. We have little small group spaces and those collaboration spaces spread throughout the building. So if a kid needs to get up and move and go do something or work with a partner somewhere else, they can get permission to do that. We provided our special ed director worked with my assistant principal at the time, and they found sensory items for like just-in-time breaks and things that are sprinkled throughout the entire building, so that kids could get those sensory need breaks when they need it and as they need it. And all the furniture was selected to not be stationary, but it's all on casters, so it can all be moved and modified as the teacher needs. So everything in our collaboration spaces um, has wheels and can be rearranged. Everything in their classrooms, the furniture that was selected are desks that are actually kind of in a fish shape, so that they can be put together and twos and threes and fours. We have teachers that set it up almost like stadium seating in the designs, and they can constantly be moving it. So everything is flexible. They're not in rows anymore, or if they are, we're in rows now. We're going to groups of four, and it happens within minutes. Um, and some of the furniture selected, it rocks, it wiggles, it has texture to it to encourage movement and adapt to sensory needs throughout the day.
So on the topic of actually the motor and motion movement,
Yeah.
you were talking about how like expansive the school really is. Now I'm thinking, my first question was, with the expanse of the school and all the features inside of it, were there any funding issues as a school district that the school faced building this, or was there a lot of just support and help to make this happen?
No, as far as funding goes,
Yeah.
um, so um, we're blessed to be in. We're in a larger district that has some rural sections, but it also has Cranberry Township, which is a little bit more of a business center and a affluent suburb of Pittsburgh. So the tax base from there is a big help to projects like this. But we also we looked for things that we could do that didn't cost much more, that could also embed learning in the building. For example, each hallway, we chose different colored um, flooring to indicate pathways and to help with wayfinding throughout the building. It didn't necessarily cost more, but it supported the process of something within the building for teaching. Or collaboration spaces are separated from hallways by a different colored tile, and each section of tile like that is in a specific pattern that was designed. It did not cost any more for the tile. It's just different colors that show, um, like one in my side of the building here is arranged in a Fibonacci sequence. So, and it's the challenge is, can you figure out what that pattern is. There's patterns throughout the building like that that didn't cost any more. It was just the colors that were different. Or we have a southern facing window that we put one blue pane of glass in instead of clear glass, because it acts almost like a sundial on the wall that kind of predicts the season. Didn't cost any more, but it was a creative adaptation that we could do. But we were greatly helped with the building when we, in the construction project, this building went to bid when businesses started to be able to open up again coming out of COVID and the pandemic shutdown of everything. So at that time, a lot of construction companies just they were looking for work, and so from the financial side, our bids came in much better than we ever expected. So this building today would cost quite a bit more than it did when we built it 2 years ago.
So it was built a few years ago, so that kind of gave you the okay, I understand. So when it also comes to, I think, features like the kind of like the blue pane of glass
Mhm.
and some of the other like tile features and anything, were there any issues that came about when it came to like state or federal regulations when building some parts of the school?
No, but interesting enough, Pennsylvania, there's not like a reimbursement plan that restricts what you can build with a school, where I know there are some states that are different and do have it's much more black and white what you can build. Um, However, we were one of the first schools. I think we were the first school in Pennsylvania because of changing regulations. Our We have like a music wing of the building, and that whole music and art are in the same wing of the building. That whole section had to be built differently because of new regulations. It's its own storm shelter, so that it can withstand tornado, hurricane force winds. But it was part of, we are now in a section of the country that is considered impacted more by global warming and seeing more turbulent weather. So we had to build a storm shelter within the building. So that part of the building was affected by those new regulations.
Okay, so was the storm shelter was how was it kind of designed inside the school? Because you mentioned that the school was constructed first, and then you kind of had to alter to the storm
Yeah.
shelter regulations. So how was that
That
process?
Yeah, they factored that into the design process. So they when they looked at the design of the building, they zeroed in on that wing because it has several music classrooms and a band and an orchestra space, as well as two art rooms. And so when we looked at how many students this was designed to hold, the architects calculated that that section of the building could serve as the storm shelter as required by law. And so it essentially it's like a reinforced concrete bunker in that area. So part of the learning of that part of the building is not just the music, but also the fact that it's a storm shelter and why it exists. It has its own generator, its own water supply and restrooms and everything. So,
I understand. But on the topic of safety, I think sadly we have to consider kind of the importance of protection against things like
mhm.
gun violence in recent history with like events like Sandy Hook. So what are some features at Ehrman Crest that can really prevent any further violence from happening inside the school and you know, creating a safe environment for students?
Yeah, the number one thing that we looked at through the process, and the architects brought this up, and we had a director of security that was involved in the process for our district. The first number one thing emphasized was line of sight. So the building was set up with these wings that when you stand at one end of the hallway, you can see almost everything down to the other end. Or when you look at it, has lots of windows, but that's on purpose so that you can, and um, it has low landscaping so that you have clear line of sight. And then there's embedded security things within the building without going to specifics that were in the case of a true emergency that we could adapt and utilize. But line of sight was number one. And then the way landscaping was involved, the way some of the outdoor features were involved, it was all about not just aesthetics, but little things like we have large concrete structures out on our entry walkway. Well, that's like the target red ball, but it's for safety. It's not just for appearance. It slows people down. It is those things are heavy. No one's going to move one of those easily. So it's little things that were embedded throughout. But we truly did start with line of sight being number one because if someone doesn't belong, they're going to stick out more clearly that way.
Sweet. And I think that's a perfect way to really help with safety in the future. Now, since at this point in time, I think Ehrman Crest is one of the most unique schools in the country right now. And not many other schools in the nation kind of feature the same sort of innovations that have been implemented. So do you think in the future there will be kind of a big opening for other schools to sort of implement more of the features that you guys have over time?
Yeah, honestly, I think that's the hope with any project like this, that it becomes kind of like the ripple in the pond, and that other schools start building off of the idea. I hope this is just the beginning because I do think, um, kids are engaged differently, and a lot of our schools in the United States are aging. Like the school we came from was actually built in like 1938, so a lot of schools are aging, and this could be a template for what we look at in school design. And even if it's um, remodeling a school instead of building new, because not everyone has that ability, looking at some of the features like how we design um, glass color or floor color to be part of the learning, or we put up pegboards to display learning and hang projects in process. Um, we even have some things that are clear plexiglass panels instead of a wall, so you can see the HVAC system and learn what that is and how it works. So I think when even for remodeling projects, it gives the ability to do things that might not cost more, but embed learning and that open process throughout the building.
Yeah, I definitely hope that, many more schools in the future will implement sort of these like the easy features to see the HVAC system that is really just going to make students more creative.
And it
Now,
sparks that curiosity.
yeah, I agree. It's going to allow kids to kind of think from, the HVAC system that build on and kind of like learn engineering and stuff like that. So now, sadly, as we are running out of time, I always like to ask this same final question for all of my guests, as they've seen a lot of, different innovations, different sort of fields. So my question is, with like a new frontier that has came in recent times with like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and all these cool stuff, what do you think is the next frontier of innovation? And it doesn't even have to be school related, but just anything that will be kind of the next frontier in society.
Wow, that's a great question. Man, I have to ponder that one. The next frontier in society. You're probably going to have to edit out some of my rantings here. Um, I think it's going to be you mentioned augmented reality and artificial intelligence. I think it's going to be we're already seeing how it can be used in some professions to almost take away some things that humans typically would spend a lot more time on, and make it more efficient. So, in light of that, if it's freeing up that brain space and memory because it's allowing us to focus on more, how do we leverage that? So how do we leverage AI and augmented reality, especially in a field like education, as a tool that's not to be feared, but something we can use effectively to make our jobs easier, that we can be more productive in other ways. And the challenge from that is we're preparing kids for a future workforce and we don't know what that's even going to look like. So for us, I think the innovation comes in continuing to spark the foundational learning they need, plus the ability to be problem solvers and creative thinkers and critical thinkers, because those are skills they're going to need in the future in light of all the evolution of technology.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's definitely a scary thought process for not even just me and you, but for all the viewers as well. Just the thinking about how these different innovations could take over our futures. So I think we'll leave that to the viewers to ponder. So sadly, we are out of time. So I again want to thank Mr. Eiler for coming on the show today. So thank you.
And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to talk with you today.